Welcome to our third Generative AI event, kindly hosted by our friends here at Google. This is going to be the first event where you can heckle us digitally, as well as in person. So we've got this great tool called Slido, where you could submit questions or comments or whatever it may be as we're going along, and there'll be a few polls as well, for which we'll be sharing the results during the panel. So today we're going to be building on the kind of previous two events that we held. So the first one was really focused on taking generative AI generically, like in all the great excitement around it, and really focusing it in on where we could apply it in the advice industry. So what are the use cases that would make sense? We then went on to our second event where we got a bit more granular in our thinking around what would be the best things to apply AI or digitize, and what the best things that should only be really done by human beings. And that was like the theme for the second event we held. And today we're going to be talking and really focusing the whole event around how you then apply generative AI and build generative AI features that really work, and all the kind of best practices around that. The technology continues to just develop at a staggering rate. It's becoming faster, more accurate. We now have the ability to generate video, audio, and images. So videos like this, which is one of my personal favorites. Could kind of watch this all day. Generated by Sora. And this is from a couple of months ago. There's even more advanced videos that are now coming out. And then my personal favorite. So for those who know me, I do like a good dad joke. And I can now illustrate them, which is great. So I don't know whether anyone can guess the punchline of this particular dad joke, but why should you always knock before opening the fridge? Anyone want to hazard a guess? It's because a salad might be dressing. Do you get it? Yeah. And there's even a multiply.ai office fridge right there. For the team at Multiply need to put up with this every day. So, so I know what you're all thinking. How are we going to top that today, right? How are we going to beat this? Well, I'll tell you how. We've got two fantastic speakers. We've got Matthias from the team here at Google, who's going to be who's essentially he's an actual Google engineer. So we're very lucky to have an engineer from the AI team give a talk today, and he covers many different fintechs in the industry, and so he is a great person to talk about learnings from many different applications. He's also going to cover a topic which I find really interesting, which is selecting the right model. So there's been almost a proliferation of different models that people can now use. So making sense of that all, and as a special bonus, he might even be building something real time whilst he gives a talk, just to impress us all with some of Google's latest models. But they're going to have Chantal. Chantal is a senior researcher from Exponential View, which in my mind is pretty much the best newsletter research product out there in terms of keeping up with not only the advances in AI, but even beyond that. And she's going to be covering the kind of evolution that's taking place in generative AI, but also best practices, not just from the world of finance, but way beyond that. Because I think there's so many learnings that we can take from different regions, different sectors, different industries, and learn from them. Then we're going to have a refreshment break, and I'd urge you all to grab some, because the spread that our friends here at Google have put on is fantastic. And it's not going to be available at the end of the event. And after that, we're going to have our panel. So that's going to focus on opportunities and challenges applying generative AI. We've got a fantastic panel. And that's going to be hosted by Tim, who's our Chief Product Officer here at Multiply. But first of all, you've got a bit more of me. And I'm going to be sharing some of our thinking around best practices by running through 3 features that we've been building. We've actually shipped a few more than 3. We've shipped 6 so far this year. But I felt it would be a good way to maybe run through some of our thinking around best practices by talking through what we've built and our thinking around that. And just to give a bit of context before I go through them, the way we have kind of progressed our thinking in terms of applying generative AI across our product is to make it more targeted and more focused. So we now think of applying generative AI in 3 different areas. So there's one area which is customer facing. So essentially the journeys that kind of clients go through. It could be a fact find journey. It could be getting a financial plan. It could be executing on that. Then there's a whole kind of area we look at, which is all around advisor tooling. So that is focused on making advisors as efficient as they can be, and really removing as much in terms of kind of admin tasks that they have to carry out. And then the final area is all around risk and compliance. So we've got a lot more targeted in the way we kind of think about the different features that we can deploy and build. And then beyond that, within each of those categories, we have target metrics that we want to kind of improve or build on. And the first feature I want to run through is very much part of that theme. So we've built something which is part of a fact find. So a fact find is the part of the customer experience where information is essentially collected. And we've already got a very strong fact find experience of collecting information and getting clients who register all the way through to getting a financial plan. There's always been one area that has had, I'd say, between 50 and 60% of the overall drop-off whilst going through that journey. And that is the point at which we collect information about the existing products or policies that a client or a household have. And within that, the real challenge for us is pensions. That tends to be the area. I know Scott's here today working on some fantastic LOA technology, but that is the area where we find the greatest mismatch in terms of what we collect or the greatest drop-off points. So we've built something where clients can now upload either a screenshot, or it could be a photo, or it could be an image or a PDF as part of that fact find. And we can essentially read that and pick out the relevant items to populate the fact find and go on to generate advice. Now, what are the kind of best practices, or what have we applied here to kind of make it really work? And we've kind of tested this quite a lot. It's performing really well. It is reducing drop-off rates. The first thing I'll talk about is fault-tolerant UX. So this is a concept where if you're deploying technology where 80% or 20% of the effort gets you 80% of the way there in terms of something that is useful and something that helps clients, then it doesn't really, like, you want to almost avoid the 80% of the effort to get it to 100% sometimes. And the way you can do that, and sometimes actually it can be very difficult to do that. It can take months and months of training and a lot of money to get it absolutely perfect. So we've used this concept of fault-tolerant UX, whereby once we collect the information, we can get clients to sense check it. We can have guardrails around the data that we collect, such that we can flag up to our in-house advisors or checkers of anything that looks erroneous. The other thing is leveraging the latest models. So this is not just focused on text. It can process photos. It can process images. Something that I think is super cool is that it can read graphs. Like, it's not just data. It's not just looking for numbers. It can basically understand and comprehend a graph and read off it. And then lastly, what I mentioned earlier, which is the metrics-based approach. So really targeting what we're building at reducing these drop-off rates, going through that part of our product experience. So the next feature I'm going to run through is what we call Multiply GPT. Now, this was one of our earliest explorations around the world of generative AI. So we're talking probably May, June last year. when we were playing around this. One of the product challenges we faced when we were direct to consumer was around making the interface with our customers as human and as conversational and as natural as possible. And when ChatGPT came out, we thought, right, this is it. Like we can now work a lot of this kind of conversational aspects. We all played around with it. We all enjoyed it doing certain things for us. We thought, okay, this could inject a lot of those human aspects into our experience. But we found that really difficult. So in this experience here, you're not going to be able to read all of it in the time that I have it up. But essentially what I'm trying to do is get it to help me work out how much I should be saving towards my pension to generate my desired income when I retire. So I've had, a conversation. It's asking a lot of the right questions, actually. So that's the bit that's quite impressive. The other thing that was really impressive about this exploration and building this feature out was that it was really quick to do and really quick and straightforward. And actually one of the things I recommend around this whole space is just get going, just get playing around with it and working out what the boundaries are. But where it didn't work so well was around its lack of specific knowledge. ChatGPT is very generic. It doesn't really know the intricacies of how to model a pension here in the UK, what assumptions to use. It asked me a lot about the assumptions I would have to kind of input into it. So what's my assumption for asset projections or inflation rates? And, if I kind of have a bit of an idea, but like the average person just doesn't, right? So these are all kind of elements of specific knowledge that need to be embedded into it. And the other thing we found out was that LLMs are just not great at maths and logic. And they're not built to be great at maths and logic, to be honest. Now, the exciting thing about this is where the technology is today. So there's something called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, whereby we can now connect up these models through to databases. There's the ability for them to call functions. So we've got our own pension calculators, we've got our own home buying calculators, we've got our advice engine that's fully deterministic and rules-based. So you can now train models at the right time to call functions from calculators or advice engines that have already been built. And that's super exciting. So yeah, that's the next feature I want to talk about. And then the final one is around annual reviews. And this is pretty much our kind of the blockbuster product we've got right now. It's a real pain point in the industry, post-consumer duty. A lot of advice firms are struggling to cope with the new burdens and requirements of annual reviews in the market. And so we're doing a lot of work to reduce that effort, reduce that burden for advice firms. So here we've got a feature whereby we're either taking recordings or transcripts from calls that have taken place between advisors and their clients. We can then take that and then generate a whole range of different documents. It could be some meeting notes. It could be a pre-meeting pack. It could be, a number of different documents on the back of that, depending on the requirements of the advice firm and the processes they run. But the real magic is the box on the right, which is where we've trained a model to essentially go through that transcript, go through that recording, and pick out the relevant pieces of information that are required to update a client's fact find. So this takes a lot. This takes a huge amount of context, right? It takes a lot to figure out that what you're looking for is a change in income or a change in outgoings or a change in what you're not looking to pick up. You might be looking to pick up what football team they support, but there isn't really a field for that in the CRM or in the back office system, right? Like that's a soft fact. So getting to the point where we have the context of what a client needs to look like, how to model that client, and then beyond that, what's required from the financial planning side of things to then go on to generate a recommendation is what we're really excited about with this particular feature. The other kind of, I guess, aspects of best practice within this is that we are addressing a really acute advisor pain point. Really kind of reducing the time and effort it takes to process these annual reviews. And then finally, leveraging existing integration. So, we've built a number of integrations that connect up directly into systems such as IntelliFlow. And so taking this information, figuring out what the changes are in, let's say, a customer's fact find, having the fields there in a fault-tolerant UX. So the fields are there with the suggested edits for advisors to accept if they need to accept them, or if they want to accept them, or they can edit them if required. And then allowing them to then click a button and have that uploaded into their back office system. These are the various kind of best practices there. It is combining a model with context, so injecting and fusing the context within that, such that it can be smart enough to figure out what data to look for. Cool. That is it from me around best practices and a bit of our experiences around what we've been building. I'm now going to pass it on to Matthias from Google.
Hello everyone. So my name is Matthias. I'm a customer engineer here at Google Cloud, and I specialize in Generative application in fintech. So I work with my colleague Craig, all the way up there, and we work with a lot of fintech startups and Series A, Series B, me especially in GenAI, but in every possible way to navigate Google Cloud, to build project, build solution on Google Cloud. And today I want to speak about three main things. The first is GenAI in fintech. So what I see as the more common use cases that our fintech clients are doing. You will see a lot of similarity with what Multiply is doing. Second is Vertex AI. Vertex AI is our end-to-end platform in Google Cloud. And I want to show you how easy it is to get started, to actually start implementing the use cases I talked about in the part before. And finally, as Vivek mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about models, every models that are available, especially our model of obviously Gemini models. And I will finish with a couple demo to show you how powerful these models have become. So the first thing I want to talk about is the enormous amount of potential use cases there is, not only for fintech, but for every single companies. Here I selected four, the one in bold, that are the one that I see kind of the most being used in fintech. So if you look at the first one, the customer service modernization, for example, this is the classic kind of GenAI use case that is being developed by not only fintech, but every single field. And in fintech in particular, you can imagine that it is a bit complicated to build, like for example, a chatbot, because when it comes to give like financial advice and things like that, maybe we are still not trusting what the AI could be giving. So that's why I like to see like a journey for my customer on service modernization. First, as an improvement of their operational teams. So let's imagine like some kind of Google search engine with their enterprise data to help their operational team. So this is very similar to the RAG application Vivek mentioned. Basically, you have your RAG created, trained on your enterprise data, and then you can actually query it with natural language, and you get a nice summary in also natural language that can help you answer a customer email, find a relevant document, and so on. The next step, once you get familiar with it, it is all about steps, all about like trying. Once you get familiar with the GenAI, you're happy, like the internal, because this is an internal project, the internal RAG is working, the LLM is not hallucinating, is giving proper result, then is the next step. You can maybe start building a chatbot. Why not? And instead of giving advice, financial advice, maybe you can stick to like a Q&A for now, and then start building confidence. That's how you should be doing, because AI has been going on for years, but GenAI is still fairly recent and is good for everyone to get used to it. So that's why I like this step-by-step approach when it comes to building project. The second one, which is, from my point of view, the most relevant to finance, is the transcription, summarization, translation, extraction. So this, again, is similar to what Vivek and Multiply are doing, is like, for example, document processing. So you can imagine a bank that is going through a proof of address, like for every new customer. This is a very lengthy process. I have an example in mind where like we managed to take a 48-hour process, so checking the proof of address, sending back an email, and so on, to less than 1 hour, less than 10 minutes, sorry, because everything was automated. So this is one document. I have a very cool also project at the moment where we are doing fuzzy matching with LLMs. So fuzzy matching, if you don't know, is like checking if two names are similar. So is Robert Smith the same guy as Rob Smith, for example? So there is a lot of things online to do fuzzy matching, even like mathematical equation and stuff like this. But we had an idea, like why not use LLM? Because they are very good at checking natural language. And it ended up being amazing, like giving amazing result. And I had a little, I was not sure. I was like, okay, Robert, very easy. Let's try some Pakistani name. Let's try some Chinese name. Let's try some Spanish name with like, we have like three different names in the same. It works every time because of the massive amount of data is trained on. It was cheaper and faster and better solution than what's out there for fuzzy matching. So this is a great example. It's not the type of use case you see online, because this is something we discussed with my customer and we decided to try it. But as you can see, everything that is natural language based, you can imagine having an LLM helping you resolving it. The third one actually is my favorite. I used to work in finance before, 2017 something, and I remember like a new compliance regulation thing, MiFID II, I think it's called, something massive. And I remember our engineer team switching the full dev cycle, all the new feature back 1 year, because we had 1 year of development just to get to MiFID II compliant. So 1 full year almost of new feature gone because we had to focus on MiFID II. Now imagine if you had like some kind of bot, an assistant, you can give it like the 200 pages of like the new compliant, and you ask question. You're like, what point should I be focusing on? If it's an update, what is the difference between MiFID II and I don't know if there is a MiFID I, but like, what's the difference between the two? You could ask, you could send, you could give it your code base, the compliance document, and say, what should I change in the code to be compliant? So again, this is, and I think for financial institution is extremely relevant because it can save a lot of time. And I remember losing 1 year of new feature. If at the time we had this possibility, it would have been amazing. And lastly, I never want to finish this example without the fraud. Obviously, it's the proper financial use case. And you can think like fraud detection is not generative AI. It's proper predictive AI, machine learning, nothing to do with generative AI. And it's good to remember that generative AI is not the same thing as machine learning, but it's not replacing it. It can be used in addition to it. And for fraud detection, for example, all my customers are doing fraud detection the classic way. So machine learning, we train the model with a lot of transaction. But now we were thinking maybe we can have we can add some generative AI element to it. So imagine your machine learning model that is training from normal data, and you have maybe in your transaction a massive chunk of text explaining the transaction or explaining the vendors, what the vendor is doing. You could ask question to LLM to fill from unstructured data, from text, a new field that you could be using for predictive AI. So let's say, is this company, does this company look weird to you? Or like, you could ask question like this, have a yes or no, and then train the model on this new added data. So again, think about not just using Gen AI, but using it as a complement of predictive AI. So now that you have a lot of good ideas, I will show you a little bit how to get started on Google if you want to build something similar in Google. This is what the Gen AI workflow look like on Google Cloud. So Vertex AI is our end-to-end platform. It's used to do Gen AI application, but also machine learning application. And today I just want to focus on the agent builder and the model garden. So the agent builder is kind of our out-of-the-box tools, great to do POCs, to understand if your use case is viable. And the model garden, as Vivek mentioned, I want to discuss a little bit about all the different models that are out there. So if I go to, to the Vertex AI Agent Builder, you can see a lot of different things to do. So the first thing is out-of-the-box custom agent. So this is what I mentioned before. If you want to create some kind of search engine with your enterprise data, if you want to create an agent, a chatbot, you can basically do it in a couple clicks in there. You just need the data, create a data store, and then you just can create a search engine or a chatbot in a couple of clicks. You also have in the same stack, you have document AI processors. So this is what I mentioned, where you can basically create and train a model to understand your document and from unstructured data get structured data, which is the best thing you can do if you want to process data at scale, do some analytics, and so on. So this is what the document AI portfolio look like. So you have general pre-trained processor. So this is great if you have like some, in your company, for example, you have forms that are filled by your clients manually. Sometimes it's difficult to read. You can imagine that you will need a human to read it. But now it's very, very easy to do it with AI. So this is all the pre-trained one. If you have some complex documents that are like with a weird layout, with some graphs and so on, you can start building and training your own processor. And we make it very easy to do it via the custom processors. And then we also have some pre-trained processor for like the common use cases like bank statement. I think we have French ID card. We have a lot of things like this that are pre-trained that you can use out of the box as well. So this, you have to imagine, is a part of a solution. You have the whole AI is kind of done for you, but you have to then integrate it in your solution. Think about the good thing with this out-of-the-box solution is that they are enterprise ready. So even though we are talking LLM, even though we are talking generative AI, all of the filtering, everything has been done for you by Google, basically. The second part is the agent builder. So this is the one that is getting the most, I guess, love in my customer, because it's very easy to implement, again, in a couple of clicks. So what can you do with Agent Builder? You can create, launch, and manage agents. So an agent is just, imagine a human agent that you train with natural language. You can imagine the same with this solution. You give some English instruction, and it will follow it. So this is agent. You can create a chatbot the traditional way with some actual codes, or you can build, my favorite, a search engine with your data. And now, the more this is getting almost 2 years old already, and we keep adding new features that are very interesting. So for example, my favorite is the grounding with Google search. So grounding is to make sure your LLM answers are not hallucinating. Is not hallucinating, is grounded in truth. So he is generating something, and then he checks in the grounding data if what he's saying is not wrong. And grounding with Google search basically is just a box that you tick, and then it's going to look at on Google search to understand if what he's saying is actually correct. So this is an amazing, very easy tool to use just to make sure your LLM is not hallucinating. Then you can ground with your enterprise data as well, as I mentioned before, and so on. And finally, you can take action. So Vivek mentioned it. We have the function calling, which allow you to, based on the intent of the user, calling the LLM, you can basically tell it, the LLM to send an email or book a flight or whatever. This is made very easy on Google Cloud. So that's the two kind of main out-of-the-box solution I like to talk about. We have many more. You can also build a full stack, but I think it's like a 1 hour presentation, not 20. So happy to discuss after. I think we have a Q&A, so happy to take any question later. And now, models. So on Google Cloud, if you remember, at the bottom of the stack, there were Model Garden. Model Garden is basically our way to deploy all the Google models, so all the Gemini, PAL model, Imagen, which is to create image, Cody to create code. All of this can be deployed in one click. Google task specific. So you have DokeAI, which I just mentioned before, that you can call via the API. You can create speech from text, so a lot of specific model. Domain specific, so this is not relevant for this audience, I think, but basically we have an LLM that has been trained on medical data. We have an LLM that has been trained on cybersecurity data. So you can imagine if you were in this field, you could have a very, very specific LLM to answer your complex questions. And finally, we have obviously all the open source models. There is 100 of them that are available to deploy in one click. So we have the last Llama model. We also partner with Anthropic, for example. So we have the last, I think last week we announced the last Opus 3.5 or Sonnet 3.5, which is arguably the best model right now. We have, I don't know if there is developers in the audience, but like we have integration with Hugging Face. So Hugging Face is the main place to find all the model. So again, in one click, you can try and deploy a model. So why do we propose all this model? Why don't we just show the Gemini one, which are also arguably the best, from my opinion? That's because there is a best model for one model for one task. So LLMs, as Vivek mentioned, are very good at complex tasks, at not very specific tasks, but they are good generally for any type of question, any type of task. But when you start getting a bit deeper, a bit specific, one LLM might become better than the other one. So there is no rules. I know maybe you wanted me to bring you a rule and say, oh, if you have this use case, you should use this. GenAI is still new, quite recent. Everything about GenAI is about trying. So you have a specific use case, a complex prompt, you send it to Gemini, and you check the result. Then you send it to Claude, you check the result. You send it to Llama, you check the result. Mistral, the French one, you should try. Very good. You have to try. It's all about testing and investigating the result. And this, I want to finish with the Gemini model. So these are our three main models right now, which, again, like as mentioned, there is one model for different tasks. So for example, Gemini 1 Pro is the cheapest one, but we have added the supervised tuning capabilities. So supervised tuning, imagine you have a massive amount of data to train the LLM. You want it to be better at your specific task. So you give it a little bit more data, your use cases, and it will change a little bit the last, if you're familiar with the way it works, the last basically layer of the LLM will be changed specific to you, and it will be better at your specific use case. 1.5 Flash, which is our latest one, faster, better, I think is the best overall. So if you have, it's always good to start with this one, but it's great at everything. And 1.5 Pro, which is amazing for one reason, is the new 2 million context window, which I will demonstrate in 1 second. Basically 2 million context window, you can imagine sending it 2 hours movie and ask a question at a very specific timestamp, and it will be available in maybe a minute or so to find the relevant information. So super impressive. So now the demo. I have 2 demos, and usually, as we said in the demos, there is 50% chance it's failing. So let's try to have one working today. So this is the Google Cloud interface, and I want to query Gemini 1.5 Flash. So you can see it on the top right here. So I found a novel online, the Dracula novel, original. I took this one because it opens, no problem with copyright and everything. But you can imagine, you can see on the bottom right here, 200,000 tokens, which is, one token is about 4 letters. So it's pretty FT. I can maybe show you if I have it here. There's a thing that I should not be showing, but so yeah, like this is the amount of text I'm throwing at him. You know, there is 15,000 lines. So now I'm telling him, read through the text above and find a character that does not belong in the Dracula novel. What is this character doing? So it should take about 20 seconds. I have also a third one with a video, but it takes usually a minute to run, and I'm short in time, so I can show you. Oh, the character that does not belong in the Dracula novel is Matthias Canales. This is because Matthias Canales is not a character from the... So you imagine 15,000 line. I obviously inputted my name in the middle, but in like how long? It doesn't show, but like in less than 20 seconds, he went through all the thing. He understood that one character was not in the novel. This, if you take this and you put like a compliant document, like the one I was mentioning before, you can imagine how good it will be to discover the kind of information you need. The second one is the one that is the most likely to fail, but is also the most impressive. So I talked a lot about finding information, but obviously they are very good at generating information. So do you know, like when you don't have internet on your phone and you go on Google Chrome and you have a nice little game, the Dino game, right? So fun fact, it's been created by a French guy in Google. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try to reproduce it. It's in my blood, I should be able to do it. So here is my prompt. So it's also a good indication of how to properly prompt Gemini, because you should be prompting LLM differently. Like Gemini understood better this type of prompting, for example. So first, I set the scene, I set what he is. So I say, you are an expert game developer, and I want you to create this game. Then I give it a list of tasks. So I'm like, there is a dinosaur in the middle of the screen. There is obstacle continuously coming from the right side. The player can jump with the spacebar, and the score is increasing over time. And the third part is the type of output I want. So here I just want a Python file. So here, it's extremely fast. 4 seconds. You explain a lot of things. So let's try that now. Here I have a nice little IDE ready. So I'm putting the code. Let's hope. Here we go. Okay, it's working. Like you have the cactus that are flowing. The game is stopping when I touch one. I think, I can make it fly as well. But yeah, so now I want you to imagine this is one prompt. So you can use Gemini as a chat interface. So you could say, look, the dinosaur is flying. Can you change that? And then iterate on top of this. So if you have a lot of time, like I just had one prompt, or if you want to something very precise, something very accurate, something very good, you can imagine how good an LLM can be at helping your developer, for example, with their job. And I just want to finish with the Gemini API, which is available for everyone to try. So if you go to the Google AI Studio, you don't need to have a Google Cloud account to use Gemini. You can actually use it on the Google AI Studio. So everything that I showed now, you can actually go and try. I think the 2 million token window is now available online as well. So I welcome you to go and try. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me today. It's an incredible moment in time. Not only do we have a general election today, but also we're at the dawn of one of the most incredible and momentous technological transitions. It's certainly one of the fastest. And maybe we're also at the dawn of a new industrial revolution. So it's a good time to just come together and talk about what's going on. So Vivek briefly introduced me, but I'm Chantal Smith. I am a senior researcher at Exponential View. And as he said, we're known for our newsletter. We're a research and media organization. We also have a podcast and a TV show. We do a lot of different things. The idea behind what we do is to kind of make sense of everything that is going on in the tech space, kind of find signal in all of the noise and connect all of this technological change and the speed at which it's happening, and really trying to show the trends and make sense of it, because we're inundated with information all the time, so it can be really difficult to make sense of it. So that's why I'm here today. I just want to provide a small glimpse into the moment that we're in with generative AI. So I'll kind of quickly present where I think that we are, and then I'll go through kind of how it's being applied and how we're starting to make sense of it across different industries with 2 little examples. And then we're going to kind of narrow back into financial advice so that I can kind of segue into the break and then later on to the panel. So it turns out that AI is moving very, very fast. We all kind of know that because either we're in the field or you know because everybody is saying so. You see so many articles about it all of the time, and so you have this sense of always being late. But actually, it turns out that it's very difficult to tell how fast AI is improving. We don't have particularly good ways of measuring how well it's doing. So I just wanted to kind of zoom out and look at compute. It's a really good proxy for the improvement of models and how well they do because of what we call scaling laws, right? So the more compute and data that a model is trained on, the better it will perform. And so if you look at this graph, right, and this is the vertical axis is logarithmic, you can see that from about 2013 and increasingly from 2021, we have so many new models coming out that are really, really just exceeding expectations every time. And it's just going faster and faster. I mean, this is a cloud of dots. It's so dense by this point. And so we have all of these wonderful researchers like the people at Google that are really improving these technologies. And at the same time, we also have adoption that is following. So let's go back to ChatGPT. Think that they got to 100 million users only within 2 months. Look at the other people here, like the big actors, the other big technologies that might have had a similar speed. TikTok and Instagram, they're nowhere near that kind of speed. And even if you look more broadly in history, the spread of a technology that fast to that many people is almost unprecedented. And as we have all of this hype about AI and we tell all these stories and it captured so much imagination, now we also have the reverse discourse. So some of you might have seen the article from The Economist that just came out where they're saying, well, where's the productivity boost, right? There's all of these new technologies, but we're not seeing it appear in macroeconomics. We're not really seeing these effects yet. But let's just remember that ChatGPT is about a year and a half old. And I'm talking about ChatGPT because that's when generative AI really entered public consciousness. A year and a half is an incredibly short amount of time. You can't expect it to revolutionize an economy by that time. And sometimes because there's so much going on, we forget how short of a time it's actually been. Now, there's no wonder it's been adopted so fast. It's really, really easy to use. There's very low barrier to adoption, and it works really well. It feels a little bit like magic sometimes. And there's this whole field of science now where we're trying to figure out really how it can make you fast, how it can make you better, how it can help supercharge your productivity. One of these articles that was done is one of the high quality ones, so I like to cite it. They took 800 Boston Consulting Group consultants and gave them a certain number of tasks, and then some of them had ChatGPT, some didn't. And on certain tasks, those that had access to ChatGPT were 25% faster on average, their quality rose by 40%, and really interestingly, those that originally had quite a low performance saw the biggest boost, so it's also an equalizer. So brilliant, right? This was the promise. If you can supercharge every employee, that means you can do anything. This is every organization's dream. Except, of course, there's the flip side of this. There's other tasks, and a lot of research is finding that as well, where AI isn't really helpful, where actually it'll make stuff up, right? Hallucinations, or just people then afterwards fall asleep at the wheel and forget to check things. And so it's actually quite unhelpful. And this is where the emerging science is really interesting, is that we're starting to see that there's certain tasks it's really good at and certain that aren't. And the barrier, that kind of line between what it's good at and what it's bad at, is not immediately obvious. You have to go out and try it. You have to be on the front lines and see what it's good at or not. On top of that, that line, that barrier is shifting. It's shifting for 2 reasons. First of all, we're getting better at using the models. As you said, better prompting, better systems, but also we have more and more new models, and the improvement is really fast. So this is a very promising technology, but at the same time, it's difficult to know what it's good with, and it's all just kind of unclear. So how are industries dealing with this, and how are people dealing with this? Well, according to one survey, there's many of these surveys. They're going to give you widely different numbers, but this is a BCG one. And so they've surveyed a lot of very large firms, and they found that about half of the companies are piloting a generative AI application within the company, and 10% of them are scaling. And so what goes into that word piloting is basically a lot of experimentation and seeing that some things are working, but also seeing that some things are failing. So let's talk about a failure, shall we? One company that had a rather public failure was Air Canada. You may have seen this news, but what happened was that they implemented a chatbot for their customer service, and the chatbot gave them wrong information about the policy about bereavement. So it said, as long as you submit a request within 90 days, we'll give you back part of the money. That was not a part of their actual policy. It said somewhere else in the website, but why would the customer go check somewhere else in the website if the company chatbot said so? So at the end, it went to court, and the tribunal found that Air Canada are in fact liable because it says so on their website. And they say, well, I don't care if it was said by, it was written by an intern or by the CEO or by LLM. It's on your website. Therefore, you're liable. So they were forced to enact it, right? So this is what we were talking about, the problem of hallucinations. But now let's go to a more positive experience. There's one company has very loudly been talking about how great their experience with generative AI has been, and this is Klarna. So Klarna, as many of you may know, especially as we're in the financial space, is a Swedish fintech company specialized in lending, especially to consumers for smaller purchases. And they, in this February, they reported that they had implemented AI successfully within their customer service. And then within the first month, 2/3 of the queries were done by their AI. Which is the equivalent of 700 full-time customer service representatives, right, in the first month. And according to what they've reported, they roughly have the same success, and they're also being appreciated kind of in the same way as the human. So there appears to be no real difference for the consumer, but it is faster. Later on, they also automated a lot of marketing. So they've been using other marketing agencies a lot less, using image generation, a lot of these different things. So they ended up freezing hiring, and now they're expecting to reduce their workforce by about 20% a year because they're just not hiring new people, and that's their general staff turnover. So what can we learn from this? I think there are 3 lessons. First of all, you've got to choose the right technology. That's because customer service, we've seen that in the example of Air Canada, but we see it here. It's not about one application that works or one that doesn't. There's a lot of different choices that you'll be making. And for example, RAG, as Matthias was talking about, retrieval augmented generation. I'm a sociologist, please forgive me. And this is going to end up being important. So you can't give up immediately, and you need some technical expertise. Second, you need a human in the loop. What Klarna have done, from what they've said out in the open, is that they always had their employees very close at hand. If something was a bit too complicated or a bit too weird, immediately give it to a human being and always keep them in the loop. And the third point is about experimentation and learning. And they did that through their employees. So since the beginning, they gave, I think they say 90% of their employees are using generative AI from the beginning. And that's because the CEO very early on said, I want to be OpenAI's favorite guinea pig. So they had a Slack channel with them. And everybody in the company needs to try and experiment and learn. And they've probably failed many times, but this is what we see has worked. I think this is one of the most important points, right? So let's go back to this. Half of companies are piloting generative AI, 10% are scaling. But what there also is more than half, according to this survey, of course, more than half of workers have used generative AI. This was from 2023, published in January 2024. And half of these workers are doing so without the approval of their employer. So what does that tell us? First of all, it's useful. If people are using it without having their employers telling them to do that, it is really useful and they're doing it themselves. And second, you have a problem if the people are using unauthorized tools. First problem is rather obvious. They might do so in an unsafe way. They don't really know, they don't have any guidelines. So they might put in data that they shouldn't, or it might be biased in some ways. You can have problems with that. But I think very importantly, you're also missing out on learning. Because these people are at the front lines and they can tell you what they need and what is working, what isn't working. But because they're scared of being fired or, automated out of their own job, they're not going to tell you what they've learned. They're going to keep it for themselves. And that is so counterproductive. So let's pull out two approaches and two starting points. First of all, the traditional way of kind of implementing these projects, you can take a top-down approach, in which I think the most important part when you have these experiments is to make sure that you have really fast learning cycles and that you can iterate really fast. Make sure there isn't too much admin and things like that it's all hands on deck, and that you could really revert if something is going wrong, but also adapt and learn, and especially take on board new technology. And then second, and the one that is most often forgotten, I think, or not talked about enough, is bottom-up learning with trust. Now, trust can be one of these buzzwords, but I don't think it's a buzzword in my world. You're going to have your people have a playground where they can trust that they can try things out without risking their jobs. Or you have to make it so that the people are using things, but know that it in their own interest. Not that they're going to have more work to do, but that they're not going to get any of the good things out of it. So you really got to incentivize it. And then from there, you need to have a lot of learning between people and encourage it. Because almost everybody that I talk to say, I'm underutilizing generative AI. And that goes from people that have some of the most sophisticated applications I've ever seen. And people always think they're left behind. But if you actually put in a system where people learn from each other and share, and it's safe, well, then that's where you're going to get really exceptional things. And that's because of that frontier between what AI is good at and what it's bad at. You need to be on the front lines and see what is where. And that's when you can start and create new things. So now to the starting points and how I think you should first address the kind of AI problem. First of all, and very importantly, think in tasks and not jobs. AI doesn't apply to jobs. Jobs are human invented. The jobs that we have today maybe didn't exist 20 years ago. They're changing and shifting all the time. So if you divide what your organization is doing in terms of tasks, you can better apply AI and also be really flexible with your workforce and what capabilities are needed. And second, really think about what kind of data you have at hand and what you want for the future. So you might not already have your perfect application, but start thinking about the data that you think can be exploited and be really important. Now, I'd just like to go to a couple of applications from around the world that I really like. This image is, of course, Mid-Journey generated as well. There's been so much creativity and so many applications, so many of them we don't even hear about yet because they're in pilot phase. But here are some that I quite like. There's some math tutoring through WhatsApp, which has gotten great results, at least in experimental studies in Ghana. You can have personalized DJ on Spotify. Of course, writing code and detecting fraud, the things that we've been mentioned beforehand by Matthias and Vivek. There's also drug discovery and all these tools for scientists to navigate the complexities of the biological world. And personalized language learning. There's just so many different things that you could be doing. Now let's narrow back in to financial advice. So you have a couple of challenges in the industry. I'm by no means an expert, but one thing that could be considered most important perhaps is giving better financial advice and trying to close the advice gap. I've heard on all these events that this is something that is very concerning to many people. So how do you go about that? Well, I just devised this quick graph just to show that you can go in different places, but you don't need to improve directly at the core of the business. You can go in all different directions to try, which will then have an effect on your ultimate goal. Let me explain. So, for example, you could go to the real core of the business and improve the quality of the financial advice, or help clients understand the financial advice, or they can apply new information to advice that you've given in the past. But you could also look at things that are not closely related to core businesses, to the core business. And this is often what you will end up liking the application. That's what Klarna is doing. That's what a lot of companies are doing, is that they're not risking going to the core of the business because that's too precious for them. And they're actually staying more far away on the edge. So things like onboarding new employees has been shown to be really good and really useful. You can keep morale high. You can also automate administrative or repetitive tasks. Those are some things that Multiply are doing as well. And then you can think more in terms of speed, just accelerating the process. If you accelerate the process, that means you can serve more people. If you serve more people, maybe you can put your prices down. Maybe other people can get advice. Maybe you can do more pro bono. There's a lot of different ways in which you can then help other people that usually wouldn't have access to your services. And then afterwards, you can focus a little bit more on quality and getting advice in different languages. Because, for example, if you're in London, a lot of people have English as a second language. Or you can get new insights from data, and all this is more focused on the quality. And these are just some things to get you started with. Now, the takeaways that I would like for you all to keep from this talk is, first of all, think in terms of tasks and not jobs. But when you're doing so, learn and iterate as fast as you can. Make sure that that is a fundamental part of your process, and a safe environment where you can say things and not risk having any. You can say that you're not sure, something you thought would work isn't going to work. Second, promote bottom-up experimentation. That's what I was mentioning beforehand, absolutely so important. And also, I think if you have a lot of nervousness amongst employees, this will help say, okay, you're on board with us, this is what it is, and this is why you should trust that we're not just in a boardroom scheming to fire all of you and automate all of your jobs. You are part of this journey, and you are going to be a part of this journey. And then you're going to need trust, and the trust will come between the employees, as I said, but also with your clients. And that's going to also come through transparency and taking responsibility. Like Air Canada, they had to pay up, because you need to take responsibility so that the next time people will say, well, they messed up, but at least I know that I'm safe. And you're going to need to foster trust with regulators, because they're trying to figure it out as well. If you do share a lot, as much as you can be part of the journey of actually regulating all of this and getting it on board. And you come from one of the most regulated industries, and you're touching people's lives in such an intimate way. So this kind of general trust, and especially with the tech community as well, is going to be extremely important. Thank you very much for having me. And if you want to talk afterwards, happy to do so, or you can find me here. Thanks.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Tim Elder, the Chief Product Officer at Multiply. I'm very excited to be here today with this panel to cover such an interesting topic, which is we're going to be exploring the impact of generative AI in financial services. And we're going to be looking at where we are today. We've just had a great presentation actually on where we are today, but we're going to quickly revisit that. We're going to talk about what this means for clients today. We're going to be talking about kind of the opportunities and challenges, especially for different types of organizations. And we're going to be talking about which advisors are going to thrive in this type of environment today. So in terms of how the session is going to work, we've got about 40 minutes to run through this. And you would have heard Vivek earlier talk about Slido. So if you see some questions behind me, this is actually a great way to gather questions from everybody as we go through the session, not wait for a Q&A session. So I'd encourage you to go to slido.com, sign on to this code, and then feel free to ask questions throughout the session. And during the session, we'll actually pick up these questions as we go. They can be anonymous, so if you want to ask something really spicy, then feel free to. But I would certainly encourage you to put your name with it, so we can ask you any kind of follow-up questions yourself if there's some point of clarification. So let's introduce the panel. So maybe if we start off on my left with Sam, actually.
Cheers. So I'm Sam Turner, Director in our wealth practice at a business called Altus Consulting. which pretty much means that I look after our relationship with larger enterprise clients with financial planning permissions. So typically banks, life businesses, larger wealth management businesses, and effectively made a career over talking to advisors about the role of technology in their business. So 10, 15 years ago, that was sort of retail investment platform type stuff. More recently, it's been the role of the enterprise CRM layer, advisor tooling, and, big advocate of the robo-digital automated advice movement, and a big fan of what the guys at Multiply have been doing over the last few years.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Lewis. I'm a director at PwC. I work within our consulting business focused on customer transformation, particularly within the life and pension sector. So most of my time is spent working with teams within the workplace pensions or the retirement space who are interested in building out hybrid advice models, looking at their distribution with IFAs, and really thinking about how to engage with both customers and advisors through accumulation, whether that's in workplace or individual products, and retain them into the decumulation phase of retirement.
Thanks, Jessica. Jason?
Yeah, I'm Jason Butler. One of the benefits of being older, and a lot older than this hip young crowd, is that you actually know quite a lot of people, you know a lot of stuff, and you've had a lot of experience, including what doesn't work. And I had a 25-year career as a financial advisor. In the last 15 years dealing with multimillionaires, and I thought to myself, what's it like to be a multimillionaire? So it must be really, really easy business. But then I realised when you do get rich, everyone wants your money off you. But yeah, in the last 9 years, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I sort of morphed into financial wellbeing in the workplace, literally as a complete fluke. It wasn't my intention. And that really opened my eyes to the whole issue of what people need, normal people, not ultra wealthy, and not people that literally in the last chance saloon, but the mass market. And that's an area of particular interest. And I also volunteer 1 day a week at Citizens Advice. So I see very, very vulnerable people. And that keeps my feet on the ground about what we need to do to avoid people getting into those situations. And I'm a serial fintech investor. I've got 15 holdings that are left. 4 or 5 have blown out. And I've had 2 very, very big exits. And I'm a backer of Multiply AI because he's a very good salesman. And I'm excited about this area. I don't know everything, but I think I can bring some perspectives across both practice, technology, and the commercials. That was a long introduction.
And hello, everybody. I'm Mike. I co-founded Multiply, and my background's on the technology side. I used to be CTO. Chantal was talking about jobs that didn't exist 20 years ago. Well, these days I'm branding myself as Chief AI Officer, which I don't think existed 2 years ago. But really, it's an opportunity for me to think about what AI means for advice. Having spent the last 8 years working on Multiply, getting to understand advice, understanding something around how the industry works and what customers need, but also bringing, I guess, my technical background towards that. And yeah, that's my focus these days.
Okay. I'm like a dodgy boy band. I sat on these chairs. Why do they always give you the most uncomfortable chairs to sit on? Yeah, I'm going to say you're the Gary Ballard. Hi, everyone. I'm Craig Barraclough. I run Finnovation. So we're a consultancy really focusing on tech and operations for the advice firms. I spent the last 12 years as CTO at a large advice network. So I've lived and breathed the advice for the last kind of 15 years, I suppose. What I started doing just recently, starting to help advice businesses demystify AI. There's a lot of noise around AI and what it means for their businesses. So I'm trying to help the businesses be AI ready, understand what that means, get the fundamentals in place so that they can really enhance their businesses through AI.
Great. Thanks, Craig. Okay, so let's kick off with the first question, which is just understanding where we are today. So let's get a view of just what's the latest. And maybe the first question is, what's been the most significant impact that we've seen in general, maybe in our spaces? So maybe if I start actually with Jessica on this point.
So thinking about kind of generative AI in particular, having worked with kind of the bigger life cos, the retail banks, we've noticed that the focus has been really on the customer operations function and on complaints. So they're looking at, the service relationship, not in the advice space, not necessarily in the revenue generation, but just in maintaining the customers. We're now going beyond those kind of initial proofs of concept into scaling, as kind of Chantal spoke about earlier, but really in how you kind of keep the service agents going effectively, how they're monitoring what the customer needs, and to bring regulation into it, kind of maintaining compliance with consumer duty. And I think as much as we've seen regulation perhaps as a hindrance in the relationship with customers in the past, I'm actually quite supportive of consumer duty as a whole. I do think it really does focus on kind of evidencing the right outcomes, and technology is playing a huge role in enabling that. If I look back kind of a year ago, companies were saying, we have everything in place to prove out the 4 outcomes. They're realizing they're not there, and they're using technology, they're using solutions to enable their agents, whether that's more in quality assurance, sentiment analysis, transcription of the calls, but being able to show that they are supporting customers as needed, and really that the customers are able to understand what they're going through with the agent. So I think that's where I've seen the most scale at the moment. But
yeah, I mean, open question to the panel if anyone's seeing any other particular areas.
Yes, I have to go. So I suppose general point, right? So this industry, terrible at adopting technology, and I'm probably not going to be popular for saying it, but it is genuinely the case. But as a general point, we've been really, really encouraged by the level of innovation over the last 5 years around generative AI in particular. So even if, the use cases are pretty dull, right? It's things like trust and corporate case due diligence. So previously, a vice firm has an admin team. When a charity case comes through, a trust case comes through, they've got to trawl through company's house, look at who's a trustee, who's on the board, who are they related to, find out just how corrupt these little charlatans are. That takes someone a week to do, and now it takes 5 seconds to do. That's brilliant, but it's not the sexiest thing in the world. So actually, there are some great point solutions out there that we're seeing that are solving real problems for not only the enterprise scale financial advice businesses, but also sort of Billy back bedroom IFA can benefit from these things. Sort of other examples that we see, and I'll shut up in a sec, but other examples that we see are sort of, the obvious stuff. So taking meeting transcripts, pre-populating file notes, pre-populating suitability lists, the stuff that takes a while for a financial advisor to do, now relatively efficient, and it's really encouraging to see. And then Matthias talked about it earlier, but also the development life cycle. So you can now put together sort of screens, code with relative efficiency. And in a financial services world where integrations should be achievable but just haven't been achieved yet, that's really encouraging. So can you build an integration quicker? Can you curate a more integrated ecosystem?
Great, thanks, Sam. And maybe to the right-hand side here, just a twist on this.
Yeah, I think I would I totally agree with that. I think it depends, the question, depends on the focus of the business or the customer. So, for instance, existing advice-driven businesses that are human-heavy, okay, whether they're at the top, middle or bottom of the market or mid-market, I think they are looking at AI in small little cases. How can they be more efficient? So we know that SJP at the moment, there's a great thing on NextWealth, the recent podcast, where they talk about how they are starting the process of introducing AI models for creating draft advice. And there was pushback to start with, but once the advisor practices, which essentially are the human-centric side of the business, once they realised the efficiencies they got from this, and they could get to more customers or do less work and spend more time on their boat, once they start to get exciting. That's very different from funky new organisations, whether it be a Plum or a neobank or one of these kind of, or another type of a money supermarket or something like that. They are looking to find a way of engaging people with their finances, which is beyond a transaction. And so businesses like Money Means, which has been 2 years testing its initial tool to get people to not just don't even understand open banking, but here's a benefit of how you can use open banking to help you help yourself and get yourself to a position where you're more confident, regardless of whether you need to take advice, whether it's one-off, whether it's ongoing, whether it's heavy duty, whether it's one-off transactional. So I think the focus must be, where is the business now and what is it trying to achieve? A business that's very human-centric, advice-driven business we'll be looking for mainly initially the efficiency savings and consistency. And there was a question about vulnerable clients. If you can find a way of using your processes to highlight vulnerability, then that's a big tick in the box for consumer duty for existing business, but also neo business. So there will be some areas that are specific to a retail funky front end business. There'll be some that are for existing advice-driven businesses that are human-oriented, and there'll be some crossovers.
I think Jason's right. I think in with the businesses that I speak to in the kind of mid-size level, I think there is a lot of concern that they're being left behind. Right? There's this type that if you're not using AI now, you're being left behind. And that's just simply not the case. I mean, we saw from the stats that Chantel showed, 50% of businesses are thinking about it and piloting it. But I think there is a lot of confusion around what AI can do for businesses, what AI is, what the tools are capable of. And I think Jason's point is a really good one. With any technology, right, you need to understand what your business wants to be and wants to do. What's the future vision, how you get there, and what the problems are that you need to solve, and then find the right tool for that. And whether AI is the right tool or not, it remains to be seen. But I think that's the problem now. We've got this tool that will do, fantastic things. Anything you want it to do, it will pretty much do. But we think we should be using it, but how? What should we do? But having that business vision and understanding where your business wants to be and what it wants to be known for, the client experience and everything else, you can really then drill down into how you kind of move that forward.
Well, maybe I add a twist on this for Mike, because what I'm hearing from the panel is obviously there's different types of organizations. And we actually have a great top question here about how smaller financial advisory firms can leverage Gen AI to compete with larger institutions. So Mike, maybe you have a view on some of the technology that can be used by them.
Yeah, so I think when we think about automating advice, we basically think about advisors getting involved in things they want to get involved in. And I think typically for smaller financial advisory firms, they pride themselves on the relationship they have with their clients. Those might be very long-term relationships where they've got to know each other over a long number of years. They take care of the whole family. And that's a great example of where actually it's not, you have a long-term client, they may be approaching retirement, they have their kids have just gone through university and they want to get them started in a financial plan. That's not necessarily something that's efficient or economical for a loan IFA to be able to take on. So it's a great example of where automating an advice process for those typically younger clients, kind of incubating them, you might think of, until they get to an older age where they have more assets, they're more viable as a customer. It's a great example of I guess a flexible approach to advice. At the same time, we've talked about some of the back end tasks, things like processing meeting notes, the kind of admin of the job. That too is a great example of the things that can be automated. And I guess the promise is that the advisors then spend more time doing the things that they like. So if it's engaging with the clients, if that's your real USP, if that's the thing you really pride yourself on, don't worry. I don't think automation is actually coming to take that away, because if you're right about that being your USP, we don't, that's not what it's going to be better at than you at. But in terms of writing up the meeting notes, processing those things, getting stuff into IntelliFlow or whatever database system you're using, incubating younger clients or less economical ones, these are the kinds of things that I think it can really help with.
I think this is a really good point. Some of the firms I talk to, the guys are worried about, how do I build my own agents? How do I use LLMs? The point is, for most of us, the AI will come to us. The technologists, the multipliers of the world will bring AI to you in your business. You just need to understand what problems you're trying to solve and then using that right tool. I'm banging on the point. But it is, I've had conversation with people saying, well, how do I build my own chatbot? How do I do this? How do I do that? You don't need to do that. The technologists will bring that to you. You guys are the strategists. You think about the future of your business, and then the technology will come to you.
Just one point, that's so true. Do you remember years ago, well, you were all young, but when PowerPoint came out, people thought the way you create a talk and I speak for a living professionally. I know you wouldn't believe it. And what they did was sit down with their PowerPoint because someone had given them PowerPoint, and they created dreadful. They created a slideument. Okay, you know, death by PowerPoint with the smallest font, and think you've lost the plot. When you're doing a talk, you've got to start with who is the audience. What is the key message? Where is the takeaway I'm going to give them? Where's the funny, the humour, the high, the low, and then, can I use an image to help me with that? Therefore, should I use Keynote or PowerPoint? So in other words, AI almost is the Keynote, the PowerPoint, what's it called? What's that one that makes you feel sick? Prezi. You know, the one that goes all over the place. Makes you feel like you've been on a bender, doesn't it? And when you're watching it, it's awful. Anyway, but the point I'm making is AI is the tool, that's it. You've got to start with what your business, where the pain points are. And if you start with both efficiencies to make it cheaper or more accessible and or make clients feel better. So if you watch a presentation that has a picture that augments what the speaker is saying, you remember the talk much more than that 1,000 font, millions of words slide that was there that no one could see.
Yeah, I think that the other piece I would add here is, you know, the advisor market itself is growing at 1% annually. And there's about 30% of the UK population that will be over 60 within the next 5 years. And so if we look at that, regardless if you're a small advisory firm or if you're one of the largest retail banks building out your mass affluent, you know, hybrid advice offering, everyone is looking at how to scale advice to meet an unmet need in the market. And so I think that there's going to be universal tenets of how to compete, how to provide advice. And realistically, the cost to serve just has to come down, and technology is the way to do it. We kind of have a fixed supply of those available out there, even if we do, you know, follow the traditional model of the older generation advisor serves the older generation investor, and then the younger generation comes in, and maybe it's a bit more basic, no frills, just kind of get them going on wealth management at a young age. Regardless of that, there needs to be technology and enablement. And I think what we're excited to be seeing is the cost of tech is coming down tremendously. So there's still integrations required. There's still going to be the adoption curve for how you actually get, you know, humans to want to take this on. But this is kind of something that the whole industry needs to grapple with. And I think that there's a really big opportunity actually for the smaller firms who might not be encumbered by the bureaucracy or the tech spaghetti of a massive organization.
So you're saying real big opportunity for smaller firms to be really agile, move quickly. If it's a big opportunity to reduce the cost to serve. So
just to add that, so I think Jess highlights the real opportunity for me, and that's sort of getting financial advice into the hands of people that otherwise can't afford it under the traditional model, right? So but there are a number of challenges related to that. So an IFA can only serve who they can serve under the current model. You can make them more efficient, great. They might be able to serve more people. You can introduce sort of automated advice. You can make that super engagement. But it doesn't talk to the key challenge, and Vivek and I have had this conversation in the past. You know, the lack of awareness and adoption and engagement with financial services in the UK is not down to a lack of technical sophistication. It's down to a lack of giving a shit, right? So you can curate the most perfectly designed digital hybrid advice journey in the market, adheres to all the most foremost behavioral principles going. You roll it out to a load of people and no one signs up, and you quickly realize that nobody cares. So I think the real challenge and the real role for generative AI is to engage those people at the right time. So that might look like personalized marketing comms. So show me everyone who's likely to take out a life insurance policy in the next few months. Show me everyone who's just had a child. Show me everyone who's within retirement age. So you move to a world where rather than just blanket mailing saying, did you know that we have a SIP? Fill out this questionnaire and see what it could do for you. You're engaging people at the right time on a proactive basis, and you're likely to, retrieve better results.
Certainly, yeah, sounds like a challenge. I guess like to kind of go through that theme now on challenges. Is there anything in particular that we think orgs of all sizes need to be really aware of in terms of making this stuff happen and seizing these opportunities?
Yeah, and I'll take that one to start with. And I noticed there's a question up there as to whether we'll see a customer backlash to poorly implemented AI experiences. So, yeah, I think we will, and I think that we've already seen it. with basically companies taking the AI tooling and putting a thin layer over what something like OpenAI or even Google provide and putting it straight out in front of customers. And it goes wrong pretty quickly. The DHL, is a good example where it was composing haikus about how awful DHL's delivery service was to customers on their website within hours of launch. I think the real challenge for a lot of people is you may be used to seeing some of these tech demos, and they get 80% of the way there, and you think, oh, the last 20%, they'll be able to cover that. That will come in the next few years, and it obviously gets you excited about technology. With a lot of the AI tooling that's available out there, we saw earlier how easy it is actually to get set up with some of these things. Actually, that last 20% and thinking about how you manage the risk and how you control what's being put out there, that's kind of where all the magic is. It's much less exciting, it's much less sexy, but actually that's the kind of killer difference. So I think there's a lot of exciting tech demos. There's a lot of interesting things kind of out there, but actually stuff that kind of proves more robust in the real world. I think that's what companies need to be looking for.
And there's also a challenge, right, around how do you govern the output? So in a typical advice business, you can, Barry puts through a flawed case. You can go and check that case. You can look at the transcript. You can look at the meeting notes. You can understand where Barry went wrong. If you're introducing an enterprise solution, there is this idea that you're introducing a systemic risk. And someone was talking to me the other day that was sort of saying, look, this stuff you have to accept that it's 90% accurate, give or take. Is that acceptable? And how do we find the 10%? And how do we trace it back? And how do we highlight flaws? And how do we improve these things? Essentially, all the general enterprise challenges. And the other one is how do you buy this stuff, right? So if I'm a bank, I'm used to shopping for technology solutions that solve me a problem. Now I'm being talked to about a technique, a method, a technology, and it doesn't fit neatly into the procurement approach for these big enterprise clients. So I think there are commercial challenges to adoption, as well as a big challenge around how you govern, how you regulate this stuff.
If I could add too, I think that there's one thing that we do have to be acutely aware of too is some of the bias that comes through in AI and the reinforcement of bias. And PwC is a massive adopter of OpenAI, but even we need to grapple with how do we fundamentally make sure that biases are not reinforced and not just leave it to the tech companies to solve that. So I think that there's a bit of a cultural piece here that needs to be thought about if individuals are going to be interacting with AI on a daily basis, or they're going to be using that in front of customers. How do we make sure that they're still keeping that very human element of doing the best for the customer, or treating my coworker in the best way possible, and not saying, well, the AI knows best. And I've had that personally happen to me, that I've been corrected by someone in a meeting because they said, actually, I fact-checked you. ChatGPT says otherwise. And I will say that's happened to 2 female coworkers. So these biases, it's what's in the AI, but also what's in the culture of how we are using it within our business, and also how are we thinking about it with our customer segments. Financial advice historically is catered towards the male population, not the female population. We have a massive opportunity to go for what is a very affluent and growing segment, and tooling to enable us to better reach them. But also we have to be aware of the risks if we don't think about, the inherent biases that may be going into the data.
Yeah, and the point I would make is I think there are lots of opportunities to adopt both current and emerging AI tools in things that are not a personal recommendation. So for those of you who are not aware, obviously you have guide or information, generic information, you have guidance, people like you, and then there's personal recommendations. This is what you should do. There's loads we can do with AI tools to engage people that is not a personal recommendation. Now, there's a thing called the advice guidance boundary, and it's been going on for 1 million years. And quite frankly, anyone who comes in as a new government should just get hold of that and just get that sorted. But here's the thing. Imagine I have a pension with Legal & General, only by virtue of a job I do part-time. And I must tell you, for such a large organisation, the stuff that I get, whether it's online or the benefit statements, I cannot begin to tell you, and I've told Bernie Hickman, who's head of retail, who is smoking, whatever they're smoking, who's responsible for this stuff? Because it's not engaging me, and I've been doing this job for 34 years. And when I say to my wife, okay, I'm going to show you two things. This is my benefit statement. Look at that. Now I'm going to show you a video of a young lady speaking to me. Hello, Jason. Your pension with Legal & General, it's gone up so-and-so. You've had this amount of contributions. It's gone up by this amount. And there's this amount gone in charges. And if you were to put X amount more in, you'd have a bit more, blah, blah, blah. And if you want more of that, and I said to my wife, which do you prefer? She says, well, why are you showing me that statement? What is this? Which is the one you're using? I said, well, this is one I've invested in the company that's built this. She goes, well, why would anyone want that? And I said, well, and I checked it on all of her friends. All of my friends, everyone says, well, I want that one. Now, if they then want to look at the statement afterwards or drill into it, they'll drill into it. The point I'm making is there's loads we can do before a personal recommendation to get people to engage, even if it's a few funny little videos, sort of TikTok-y, like, you could say to someone, you could take sort of well-known people and just say, what profile are you? And you've got some that have gone broke. You've got some that are really rich. There's certain stars who hold on to the money they earn and there's some that blow it all. So you can make a mixture of entertainment or infotainment with engaging tools that tell people factual information, both generic and personalised to them, and then will inspire them to go on and engage with more modern firms that can serve them with automated advice tools, which is why I've invested in people like Multiplier, because they're trying to, the bit where we get in interpersonal recommendations is then when we're actually helping people do stuff. People don't just want to know generically, they want to know, what do I need to do, and make it easy for me to do it, but make me feel confident and capable that I'm doing the right thing.
Thanks, Jason. And maybe a question for Craig, actually.
I was going to say, I've just got 2 more points.
You go for it.
Well, just going back to the challenges. There's 2 challenges as far as I see. First is data, okay? As with any tech, data is king. In terms of AI, data is going to be everything. So firms need to understand their data, okay? And I mean, what data have you got? Where is it held? How is it obtained? How is it used? How is it accessed? How is it secured? How is it leveraged? You need to know all these things before you can start implementing AI properly. Yeah, so if you can't answer some of these questions, you need to be going back and looking at your data and understanding your data. Because, we talk about hyper-personalization and client experience. I ask you a question. You've got a really good relationship with your client. Who sends birthday messages to their clients? Happy birthday messages. Anybody? So, good. That was going to be slightly awkward then, wasn't it?
I want to be reminded of getting older.
So, but imagine what happens in that situation if that date of birth has been keyed in wrong, or it's been formatted in American format, and suddenly you're sending a nice happy birthday message to your client 3 months before it's their birthday. What's that going to do to the relationship? Yeah, so data, I mean, that's just a very simple example, but data's key to all of this. And I think the second point, which I think Chantal was touching on, is your employees and the hearts and minds piece. AI is not coming for their jobs. AI is coming to help them be a better person, and better at their job, enhance them, allow them to add more value to themselves and your company. So bring them on the journey with you. Explain what's happening. I think Chantal said, we're not plotting in the boardrooms to replace you. So I think those 2 challenges, your data and your people, are going to be key when you start looking at AI.
Thanks, Craig. Okay, we're running out of time, so let's talk about financial advisors. Top question here. What skills should financial advisors develop to work effectively with AI technologies? So do we have any recommendations for advisors?
I think one of the key things is just being open to new technologies and being up for having a play. I think that there's a maybe there's a sense that people who've worked in the industry for a very long time, seen how it works, they get very, very comfortable, and there's a fear from stepping outside that comfort zone. But actually, advisors I've met, and I'm going to call out Peter, who's standing at the back there, who joined us maybe 6 years ago now, having worked a very long time in the finance industry, but is always up for trying new things, isn't kind of afraid of the technology, is kind of open to new stuff. And I think for me, that's characterized by going and having a play on ChatGPT. Start asking it some finance questions. have a go on Gemini. Have a look at where it goes wrong, where it goes right. I think there's so much we talk about, but actually just having a play yourself, being up for experimenting, will teach you so much more than anything you can read in a blog post.
I would give you this analogy. My wife and I, we had to have some cupboards put into our bedroom, and it was a lot of work. So my wife said, right, we're going to have to move into the spare room, one of the spare rooms, while they do all the work, because they've got to put plugs and everything. So we moved anyway. We were lying in bed one night, and I said, oh my God, who came up with a colour scheme in here? And the bedside cabinet was a bit of the point I'm making is that until I'd stayed in the spare room, I had no idea what our guests were going through, which is why we've got no friends. But the point I'm making is that unless you look at this from your customer's point of view and think, what are they liking? What are they not liking? I mean, for instance, if you're not playing with AI, generative AI, your customers are, your potential customers are, the children of your customers are. And the point I'm making is that why not try and play with it and ask it? There's various plugin tools you can get now and say, how would I visualize this text-based advice? So take your last suitability letter or report and ask ChatGPT, take out the client details and stuff, and say, please turn this into a highly visual that would work for 90% of the population, whatever, and just see what it can do. So just use the generative AI to stress test what you're already doing and look at it from the client's point of view. And finally, don't be led by compliance first. Be led by client and be curious and be innovative and push the boundaries and then have a fight with compliance.
Thanks, Jason. Just to whip back to kind of recommendations for advisors, I suppose there's this narrative that we hear sometimes around superpowers, giving advisors superpowers, and then some people feeling like they're going to potentially be replaced. So there's these two kind of ideas. Like, how does that play out in your mind, Jessica, maybe?
Yeah, so I think we need to remember some of the reasons that people do go to a financial advisor. We've done some surveying recently of across the UK population, and it kind of comes out again and again, not just in our research, that reassurance is a massive factor. We are in an age now, an information age, where a lot of people can find the understanding of what are the different types of products. There is the option to do self-directed investing. But people are going for reassurance, and they're going not just for the retirement decisions. They want support throughout kind of different life stages, different points in time. And so I think if we think about it as, is there a risk to the human advisor being replaced? I don't think so, because that reassurance does really come from speaking with someone that you trust and that you feel is out there for your best interests and is providing a service that maybe you wouldn't have felt as comfortable doing on your own. So where AI really has an opportunity here, and I think it's been kind of talked about throughout today, is maximizing that time spent with an individual to give them reassurance and minimizing the amount of time that's spent, remind me what you do, remind me where you've been at for the past year, remind me what your goals are again. It's taking all of that out and being able to come into a conversation within an individual and they feel like you're as prepared as they are to have this discussion, and that you're kind of able to go even one step, two steps, or three steps further of bringing to them kind of what's the best and the latest, or the best comparison of people like them, how to contextualize their situation, and really just provide that reassurance and confidence that they're making the right decision.
Yeah, it's spot on. Just quickly to add to that, I love the idea of advisors with superpowers. You imagine it's the most boring comment, but going. So we did a lot with the banks, and actually they found that generative AI is a really useful tool for upskilling advisors. So if you look at the banks, right, they haven't necessarily employed advisors over the last 10, 20 years. They've employed people to sell ISAs, and it's been disguised as advice. They're now looking at getting back into the world of pensions advice, heavily regulated, highly complex. And, you've got a bunch of 20 to 25-year-olds thinking, Christ, I've now got to advise on this stuff. I don't really know what I'm doing here. And generative AI doesn't necessarily have to talk to whole of internet. It can talk to a ring-fenced universe. And that universe might be procedures, policies, house advice documents, so that me, as a 22-year-old ISA salesperson, now having to advise on a pension, I can ask, what does the house say? Given this certain set of inputs, these 5 pensions, guaranteed annuity rates on 2, what should I do here? It gives you a head start, and you can work from there. So,
thanks, Sam. Maybe as a final take, Craig, do you have a view on this?
Yes, probably slightly contrary to the other views. So I agree in the short term that Gen AI is going to empower the advisor, and the advisor will be critical to the advice process. But I think, and I made a prediction, I think I said at the end of this decade, 50% of financial advice will be AI-led. Now, before I get lynched, let me qualify that. AI is going to, as we've said, allow more people to get more advice. And I think that advice will be either AI generated or AI led. So there will be a bigger proportion of advice that will then be AI led. We will still have face-to-face advice, but I think it will be a shrinking proportion. People say to me, well, we want the human touch, we want the trust, we want this. I think as a society, we are changing. The humanity is leaking out of society. Let me ask you another question. Who's got a family WhatsApp group? Yeah, there you go. Do you use that WhatsApp group when you're in the house together? Yeah, there you go. I see. We're moving away from talking to humans, and I think yes, money and health and emotive subjects will be the last for it to move away from. But I think we will build trust in AI and systems, potentially through other sectors like healthcare. We'll become more comfortable with the outputs. And I think once AI can demonstrate consistent superior performance and be empathetic to our personalized needs, there will become a tipping point at which point it's about value. And if I can get the same advice here from an AI model for 500 quid or from an advisor for £2,000, it's just going to be it's going to become a question of value. Now, look, we're talking about 6 years' time. The pandemic was only 4 years ago. We've said ChatGPT's only been around for 18 months. The pace of change is phenomenal. So at that point, we could all be wearing brain neural links, and we have access to all the financial advice we ever need. Be like the Matrix. Instead of I know Kung Fu, it'll be I know tax efficient investing. We won't. So, but I do think we are probably complacent if we think that the human touch is going to save the profession. I don't know. I don't know.
We've got a hard stop literally now, so what a great kind of final comment. Thank you so much to everyone. So maybe grab people as they're leaving to kind of wrap this up. But thank you everyone on the panel. That was really, really excellent. And thank you everyone in the audience. So round of applause for